Third time's a charm, hopefully. Third time's a charm. Let's try this one more time and see if you guys can hear us. For those of you who are able to come on, we'll give this a second here to start up again. And hopefully, I know my wife was on here, and she will definitely tell me if she can hear me. But this is Shawn Livingston, so we're just standing by to make sure you guys can hear us clearly. There's my wife. Tammy, can you hear us okay? Now, is the sound okay now? I need to fire my producer. That's me, by the way. All right, can you guys hear us? You hear me now?
Oh, there we go.
Yay! Thank you. Okay. So, we're just we'll kind of refresh everybody's memory. Christina, thank you all for being patient. We got it. Third time's a charm. I'm told that you can hear us now. So, thank you very much for your patience and everything. This guy has such an amazing story. It has to be shared. So I want to make sure the audio is great. You can hear us. So just to recap. So this is Shawn Livingston, who's joining us here. He's got just an unbelievable story. 100 Miles to Redemption is the name of the movie that was based on his story of recovery. We were talking about how he grew up in Ohio. As a teenager, witnessed 9/11 unfold on TV back in 2001. And it was on that day where you realized, you said by the end of the day, you wanted to join the military.
Yeah. I mean, in all honesty, while I was in my first semester of college, I quickly realized that probably wasn't my route. I didn't have the discipline at the time to be doing that. And so I just, the 9/11 happened. It kind of weighed on me all day. And, I knew I needed to make a move in life. And that was what I felt compelled to, the direction to go.
So you picked the Air Force, which meant, and Richard Delgado, one of our great military friends, is on with us here. You picked the Air Force, which automatically meant you had to come to San Antonio.
Right. Absolutely.
So then 2001, fall of 01, you come down here for training. What Lackland, what was that like for you?
Bit of culture shock, I think it is for any young man or woman going to boot camp and everything like that. I remember my first day waking up and looking around and like, oh, I signed up for this. But I operate very well in structure, any physical activity, anything like that. I've always thrived in, and so I got with the program pretty quick, and it was definitely what I needed as a young man, for sure.
Right. So you were doing that. Obviously, you were at Lackland, and then obviously things took a turn. So at what point did that happen, and did you start to find yourself in some trouble?
I'd say early on in life, I was a junior in high school. I was huge into sports. Basketball was my main passion and love. But that's what my identity was wrapped up in. So I got in a bad car accident my junior year. I had multiple injuries from that. That took basketball away from me at the time. And so there I am as a junior in high school. My identity was a basketball player. And so now I don't have that. And that's kind of where I started drifting towards, the insecurity of not knowing who I was as a young adult and wanting to be accepted. And so I started gravitating towards the party crowd. Went into the military, at first, which is what I needed truly what I needed at the time. I did 6 years in the Air Force, got out, didn't really have enough life experience to know how good I had it in the Air Force. So I was over in Germany for a year, thought I was homesick, got out, came back, went back to Youngstown, Ohio, quickly realized I'd made a pretty big mistake, that there was not much going on there. That was the whole reason I had left, and one of the reasons I left in the first place. And so for 2 years, I had tried to get back into the Air Force and was unsuccessful. They just weren't accepting prior service at the time.
I got it.
And so I needed to make a move, and the move was joining the Army, which would then bring me back to Texas.
So that was 2007. And by the way, just some people are coming on now. We had a little audio issue earlier. This is Pickup Lines presented by Gamez Law Firm. I did the glove and the whole thing earlier. But this is Shawn Livingston, who is here. He has a podcast. He has an unbelievable story, which we'll get to in just a little bit. But we were just telling everybody, so 2007, you get into the Army.
Right.
And you're stationed at Fort Hood, correct?
Yes.
And ultimately you get deployed.
Yep. So we were training to go, as soon as I got to Fort Hood, we immediately started training to go to Iraq. And so we trained, we were months into the training, and I was just doing a basic drill. And this is really where the whole story and the downfall starts. We were doing a drill. I'd come up real fast on the drill. I felt a little tweak in my back. Didn't think anything of it, pushed through it. And the next morning when I woke up, I couldn't sit up out of bed. I couldn't roll out of bed. I had herniated 2 discs that were pinching my sciatic nerve, so I was barely able to walk at that point.
So then you can't your mobility is compromised, obviously, and then you're prescribed, I guess, pain right. pills or something to relieve the pain.
Right. Yeah. I don't think back then. Obviously, I don't think the world at large was as educated on opiates back then as they were now. And
right.
So that was pretty much the answer then. But that, for me, that was dumping fuel on a fire. And so, I would be lying if I said I took them as prescribed and everything. But right. I'm a very competitive person.
Yeah.
And so there's a culture at the time in the military is if you're not ready to go, you're kind of worthless at that time. And there was no way I was going to let my brothers and sisters deploy without me. And so I took the medicine I needed to take and kept pushing through it. The ultimate mistake in all that was never giving myself time to heal. And so I just progressively made the back injury worse. The painkillers continued to grow more and more and more. Went over to Iraq, and when we came back, the wheels kind of fell off for me. That's when being left on painkillers for a couple of years at that point, and then they kind of took me off them, and it developed into its own issue.
Oh my gosh!
Would eventually lead me into heroin, and then getting into quite a bit of trouble.
Yeesh. So we have Belle and John and people coming on right now, and we're listening to Shawn Livingston's story. If you have any questions, or I know we've got some friends who I know served in the military, or just thoughts on what you're hearing so far, and we got more to get to. But did you know when this is happening that you're losing a handle on the pain pills and just the control? Like, did you realize it was unraveling?
Not really at that time. I think I was still under the delusion that I could handle it all and that I could quit when I wanted to. Once we got back from Iraq, like I said, the wheels came off. That's when I started, once the heroin started getting involved, that's when I knew, it was gone a little bit too far.
Yeah.
And then eventually I would end up getting caught in the military, going to treatment for my first time, all that. It would lead me to end up getting kicked out of the military.
Yeah.
Once I got out of the military is when, that's when a lot of the rock bottom started happening.
Yeah.
Immediately started getting in trouble with the law. Had to go away, do some time. Yeah.
Goodness. So Trina's watching us from Kerrville this morning. Good morning to you, Trina. We're talking to Shawn here. So why heroin? Like, why did you go from that pain pills to the heroin?
There was, the way I try to describe it for people that aren't in the addiction world or whatever is, for whatever reason in my brain, the way it worked, there was never anything that registered, excuse me, there was never anything that registered to me like, this is bad. And I know that probably sounds crazy to a lot of people, but it became so normal for me to stick a needle in my arm. It's as normal as it is for you to wake up and brush your teeth in the morning. That's how normal it was for me to shoot up. It never registered to me. And so it got a hold of me quickly and completely consumed my life. But
then getting your hands on it to maintain that is, I guess, what led to some bad decisions.
Yeah. I mean, it's a constant 24 hours a day.
Cycle.
That's all I'm thinking about is how am I going to get the money? How am I going to get this? And that would lead me to get me in a couple of possession charges. I'd go away and do 2 years here in Texas, got out, continued to make the same mistakes, just continued to surround myself around not the right people.
Meanwhile, your family's back in Ohio, right? Yes. You have a sister, correct? Yep. And then your parents, or you said your mother and stepfather?
In Ohio, yes. In Ohio. It's my mother, my stepfather, my sister.
So this is all happening. I would imagine this is taking an unbelievable toll on them as well. And I'm guessing they tried to intervene, or did they try to meet, or were you not having any of that?
No, so as an addict, you tend to isolate yourself away from the ones you don't want to disappoint. And so I did whatever I could to never answer the phone, to be as distant as I could, wasn't going home for holidays. They definitely knew something was up. They knew I wasn't okay. And then the brief times where they would come visit or I would go visit, they would know pretty quickly something was not well. And this I bounced around to 5 different states in 2 years after getting out of the military. I was trying to run from my problems wherever I went. What I needed to understand is it didn't matter where I went because I was still there. I was the problem I needed to get fixed.
Did you talk to anybody? Were you talking or confiding to anybody at the time about any of this?
No. Because being, like I said, isolated
myself. Yeah, you isolate yourself. Yeah.
And so I'm bouncing around to different states, no true friends, no true family. At that time, I was under the delusion that I could eventually fix this problem on my own.
So you get to a point, I think it was at 2016 or 2017, you mentioned you're facing multiple charges, up to 20 years in prison, right? And then you're at a facility, and then that's when you get out of the facility, and that's when things slowly start to turn around. So I read that a bunch of the people that were in there with you wrote letters on your behalf.
Yes.
Was it to the judge or whatever, and that spared you from the prison time?
Yeah, so I'd already been to prison, went back in front of the judge. I got my fourth possession of heroin charges. And I remember the judge looked me in the face. And you have to understand, me at this time, I'm just getting out of the military, and I always fancied myself a tough guy. And so I'm running around in the streets. I'm this big tough guy, and I stood in front of a judge, and he looked me dead in the face and said he didn't see any reason to sentence me to under 20 years. And it was at that very moment I remember realizing where like all the tough guy act went right out the window. I knew how serious it was, and so at that time it was a foregone conclusion to me that I was going away to do the 20 years. And so I remember in my head it was like, all right, all I can really do at this point now is at least try to get sober, so I don't have to go through withdrawals when I go away, and then hopefully I can get back on speaking terms with my family. Because at that time they did what they needed to do, and that was basically cut me off. They were no longer going to watch me continue to watch me work towards my own demise, and so that's exactly what I needed at the time. So that was the first time I checked myself into treatment and did it for the right reasons for myself, rather than trying to get out of trouble or appease anybody. And went into the treatment center. It was a very modest state-funded place. Went in there and had a little bit of sobriety time up under my belt. I had spent some time at the VA before, and people just started kind of rallying around me. They watched that I was changing my life. I was getting involved in the 12-step program, and I had kept a list, or basically a folder of all the work I had done at the VA and treatment, going to 12-step meetings. And then people realized that the time I was looking at, they started writing me a bunch of character letters. And so when it was all said and done, I was able to go to my lawyer, which we were going to talk about my sentencing, handed him the folder, and I just remember he opened it up and his jaw dropped, and he's like, I never expected this out of you. You've given me something to work with.
Wow.
Ultimately, it would end up leading me to getting probation, and I did not have to go do the 20 years. I got 10 years probation, and I just got off about 6 months ago.
You literally ended your probation 6 months ago?
Yeah, so they let me off 5 years early.
Wow, wow. Now, that's in large part, I would imagine, to what you've done since then.
Correct.
And so we can get into that now. So,
definitely.
So you narrowly avoid a very long prison sentence. Your family is obviously fractured in Ohio, and I don't know if you had little to no speaking terms with them. What happens after all of that? How do you begin to repair everything and get to where you are now?
So, oddly enough, I remember I was in treatment for this last time, and I took a look in the mirror. And like I said before, I had a little bit of sobriety time up under my belt, but I remember looking in the mirror and I just did not like who I saw. I was an athlete growing up. I'd let myself go due to addiction, injury. I had a huge gut. I felt like crap. I looked like crap. And it didn't matter if I had sobriety time or not. I wasn't happy with myself, so it wasn't going to stick. So I found out about a little running group that met close to where my treatment center was at. And I just showed up there one day trying to lose a little bit of weight. Remember showing up there and was like, oh, this is going to be no problem. This is going to be easy. I barely could finish 2 miles.
You were smoking at the time.
I was still smoking a pack of Newports a day. But I just remember feeling this overwhelming sense of accomplishment that I just went and ran this 2 miles.
Yeah.
And I caught the bug, kept going back, fell in with the right people. One woman in particular, a good friend of mine, her name is Penny. She saw something in me I didn't see in myself. And so she started pushing me out towards trail running. And I knew she had done these crazy things called ultra marathons.
I've heard about them.
And so I fell in with her, and luckily, I remember I ran a 10K for my first race, and I got done with my 10K, and I was all feeling myself, feeling all good, and she looked at me, and she's like, that's all right, you could do more.
Oh, no.
And so then my next race was a 30K, she did it again, and
I
did a 50K.
30K, oh, no.
And then I did a 100K in my first year of sobriety, and then what was big from God.
No, I'm just saying. I personally have done like 2 half marathons, and it's 13 miles. I know how incredibly painful and difficult that was for me. I'm not in the same shape. I'm just visualizing 100K. Like, now let me just stop you real quick, because I had read that you grew up wanting to be a basketball player, and that you loved running up and down a court with a basketball, but that you detested the idea of running on its own for sport.
Yes. Running was punishment to me. If I didn't have a basketball, football in my hand, I was in trouble for something. Not anything I would ever imagine I would ever get into as an adult, but would be one of the most important things I've ever done and completely transformed my life.
So at what point do you realize that the running is more than just the physical exercise, that it is doing something to you mentally and psychologically and everything, and that you could now use running or distance running, trail running, as a means to help you turn it all around.
Almost pretty quickly. Within the first couple of days of actually going to run, started feeling, number one, the sense of accomplishment. Couldn't remember the last time I'd actually felt that. So I kept going back, and then, when I got out of the military, I was diagnosed PTSD, depression, anxiety disorder, panic disorder, agoraphobia, sleep disorder, nightmares, just a laundry list of things. And the answer at the time was pills. And so they'd give me the pills, and that was just what the answer was for them. And so I tried the pills, I tried therapy and stuff, but at the end of the day, it didn't keep me happy, it didn't keep me sober, it was a Band-Aid. And then I never, I addressed my spiritual health. I got into the 12 steps, believing in a higher power and all that. But it was when I added in that physical piece, it was the perfect connection of all the different areas in health in my life. And the depression, the anxiety started melting away, and my confidence started growing. When you get sober, you have to understand your drug or your drink is your security blanket.
Yeah.
And now I don't have that security blanket. So stepping back out into the world was a very scary thing, very vulnerable feeling, very insecure feeling. And so now I start doing this running, and that is what helped build me back up to be the person I'm supposed to be.
So the 100K gets us, or to the 100 miles to redemption. Is it 100 kilometers or 100 miles?
100 miles. So
okay, because kilometers, 100 miles is longer.
Right. So I did.
Okay, 100 miles to redemption, and there's a video out there, part of the movie or the documentary. Did you almost quit during that race?
There was multiple times where that was crept into my head for sure.
Right, there's a part in the video where you talk about you're in so much pain, and I can barely imagine that you literally want to drop and you want to stop, and I don't know who was telling you, like, no, keep going.
Right. There was so the first I'd done the 100K, and my story amongst addicts, we're pretty open with our stories. We've kind of heard it all before. The running community hadn't heard my story before. Right. And so once my story started getting out among the running community, I ended up doing an interview with Austin Marathon, and Lance Armstrong ended up reading that interview. He invited me to come on his podcast, and I went on his podcast, and that's kind of what started. And the next thing I know, a director reaches out and asked me if I'd be willing to do something on a larger scale, and he sat down and talked with me about it. I thought it was a prank. I didn't think it was real.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I said, if you think my story can help people, let's do it. I didn't understand that yet. I didn't understand that all this pain and anguish and everything I caused, I didn't ever understand that I could use that to help people.
Yeah.
And so we ended up agreeing to do the film. I just happened to be training for a 100-mile race.
Yeah.
And so the film takes, as I work on my relationship with my family, I'm also, the race is going on.
Right.
But there's one part, I think it's probably about mile 70, 75, where I was so calorie deficient, I was slurring my words, I didn't know what was going on, and there was a real point where I was about to quit.
Yeah. So Richard Delgado, who I know served himself, and we thank Richard for that, is asking, he just asked a question a moment ago, were there any veterans organizations throughout this entire time that helped you at all, or did you seek help from any of them?
The Temple VA is about all. I went to a place called the Domiciliary, where you basically live there on the VA grounds.
Okay.
I did that for a little bit, but I didn't know, in answer to his question, I didn't really know what I needed.
Yeah.
And so reaching out for help wasn't something, I was just trying to figure it all out.
Did you ever date during this period, or did you have a significant other?
I did, but the relationship was probably as unhealthy as me or they were.
Yes. I see you have you have a band on right now.
Now I'm very lucky.
You're good.
Now
You're in a good place. You're in a good place.
Hello to my wife, Jasmine, out there.
Jasmine, he's doing great. Well, listen, why should I say that? You host your own podcast now.
I do.
So part of your journey now is wanting to share your story. You have your podcast, and I know we've spoken about your desire to get in front of groups of students or I don't know, addicts or former addicts, just any group of people that you think could benefit by hearing your story.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How's that going so far?
It's going good. Like I said, I didn't know a world existed where I could take all this and use it to help people. And so it's very special to me to be able to do. And the documentary is what taught me that.
Yeah.
And so the first time the trailer got released on the social media, the outpouring amount of people I had messaged me, and it wasn't, by all means, it wasn't addiction related. It was, but what I learned was me being willing to be vulnerable about my own story, opened up other people to be vulnerable about theirs.
Yeah.
And so I traveled around. It kind of turned into motivational speaking, and so I'll speak to one person or 1,000 people. I don't, if I can help, I'll speak there. And so it doesn't matter if it's church, school, anything else like that, I'll be there. But yeah, doing that, and then I've been lucky enough for my story to get out there, and so I know so many people has just an amazing story, and so I hooked up with some friends down here in San Antonio. We started the podcast over at Texas Innovations, and then what's been really, really cool is the fact what it's taught me, and what I'm trying to show people is that the things in my life that I was most ashamed of, a 4-time felon, I've been kicked out of the military, hooked on heroin, been to prison, the things that I was most ashamed of in my life are now the things I'm most proud to stand up in front of people and tell. Right. Because I understand now that I had to go through every single thing that I did to be who I am today, and I wouldn't change that for anybody or anything.
So how are things with your family right now?
Great. We're exactly like
your sister?
We're great. I was lucky enough to just be at her wedding in DC.
Oh, nice.
A couple months ago, but we are definitely what a brother and sister should be. There's a good healthy amount of smack talk that goes back and forth every morning and stuff like that. But things are awesome with my family, and that's the documentary helped that, and the fact it taught me to show the therapeutic benefit for not only me but my family talking about what we went through, and then understanding how it impacts people.
Gosh, and to think, I mean, how many families would have given up on you a long time ago and been like, you know what, just no more.
So many.
But
so many.
They did not do that.
No, they didn't. They stuck by my, they let me when it was time, they let me figure out what I needed to figure out. But as soon as I was back, and in answer to your question before, running was what was able to help bridge that relationship. Because anybody, and I guarantee you, anybody listening to this right now, they know somebody they're related to or they're close to somebody that suffers from addiction, mental health, alcoholism, something. It's such a widespread problem in our entire world, but there's a stigma around it nobody wants to talk about, but we all know somebody.
Oh, so for sure.
My family had heard my talk before, and I've said it's going to be different this time. I'm going to stay sober, this and that, and it was never the case. Well, I started running, and I was doing that for me. It wasn't to prove anything or anything like that. And then one thing I did was I wiped my social media clean, all the negative stuff that used to be put out. So I wanted to make sure anything I put out was positive, and so I started putting stuff about the races I was running, the results, pictures with my running friends, and running was what my family was able to see in Ohio.
I see.
Oh, something's changed. He's going to run 100K in Bandera, Texas this weekend. He must be doing something different.
Yeah.
And so anybody that wants to check out the documentary 100 Miles to Redemption, it's on Amazon.
Yeah.
Some other streaming platforms, but the family aspect in the ending is truly special, and I'm not even just saying that because it's me and my family.
Right. You lived it though, but it's cool that people can watch that story as well. A few more minutes here with Shawn Livingston, who's just been so great to share his story. And I know you want to make yourself available too. You're on social media now, but if people want to reach out, maybe they don't want to comment here right now, or they want to talk to you on a one-on-one basis, what is the best way to get in touch with you? The
best way to get in touch with me would be Instagram probably, or Facebook. Shawn Livingston, SHAWN. On Instagram, it's iam.ShawnLivingston. The podcast is iam.redemption. The podcast is not traditionally it's not a recovery-only podcast. I've had a ton of guests on that are in recovery, but my whole goal with the podcast is getting people to understand we've all been through different lived experiences. We've all been through adversity, and at the end of the day, in my opinion, we're all recovering from something.
Yeah.
And so if somebody's been through the adversity, come out on the other end, and is using that experience to help people, those are the type of people I look for to come on the podcast. And so we're just trying to spread some hope and positivity out here in this world, because anytime you flip on the TV or social media or anything like that, there's a whole lot of negative out there right now.
The same thing with my show. That's why I like to keep it positive and just share compelling and amazing stories. So I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the body art, your tattoos and everything. And I don't know anything about them, or are these a result of kind of your journey, or anything specific that is meaningful to you that you have that on your arms? Or
so, believe it or not, most all of them do have meaning. You had asked me if I wanted to bring something today, and I thought long and hard about that. And I would say this tattoo here is probably one of my most meaningful, we'll say, possessions. My buddy from the military, we talk about him in the documentary, Corey Taylor. We lost him some years back. He was one of my best friends in the world, and then I've continued to lose friends that I served with. And unfortunately, not lost them to combat, but lost them to the after effects of combat.
Not natural causes.
Right.
I mean, and I was going to ask you about that because this is Military City, USA, and maybe somebody will see this or will get to see it eventually, and either is dealing with their own issues or knows somebody, a family member. If you could speak directly to them in terms of dealing with that, being open about it, getting help for it, what would you tell them?
First of all, I just want everybody to know, anybody that watches this or listens to this is what I do now. I try to help get people where they need to be to get some help. Luckily I've worked with some of the greatest places in the country. They're here in Texas. I have close working relationships with them all. So if anybody has a family member themselves or anybody looking for help, please reach out to me on social media, the website, I Am Redemption, any of the social media, message on there. I will get it, and I will do whatever I can to make sure you or your loved one gets some help.
And it'll go straight to him. You'll be responding directly, and you just never know what that one little message or that outreach, you never know what effect that will have. A couple more minutes here with Shawn. What else do you have? Well, let me ask you this. How often do you run today?
Not as much as I used to. Now I've segued into the gym.
Okay.
It's just been a different inspiration. I'm a big inspiration guy.
Yeah.
So I ran for years. Probably the worst thing that ended up happening to me was I ended up becoming kind of good at running.
Well, how did it affect your back though? I mean, just all that running.
Oddly enough, it strengthened it up.
Wow. Okay.
But I had gained a whole bunch of weight.
See, yeah.
When I lost the weight, that helped my back tremendous.
Okay.
My back will never be 100%.
Yeah.
But I've learned to kind of work around it.
Yeah.
But I ran and I started doing very well at some of these trail races, and I just remember it got to a point where I was like, I kind of feel like I'd accomplished what I'd set out to in this sport. And then a couple different things happened, and I segued into the gym. Ended up becoming a deep passion for mine. I became a personal trainer. And so that's a lot of what I do now on a day-to-day basis. When I'm not recording the podcast, I work with a couple area treatment centers, and I go in there. The fitness aspect completely changed my life, and so that's what I try to share with people. And this is speaking to just anybody in general. It doesn't even need to be addiction. What keeps most people away from the gym, and what kept me away from the gym for a long time, is the fact I didn't want to go in there and feel like I looked silly. I didn't want people to see I didn't know what I was doing, so I just didn't do it.
Got it.
And that's the clients I work with every day. That seems to be the most common thing. And so, luckily, what I didn't know would end up being one of the best things that happened to me. I had my heart broke, and I remember going to bed that night. I was like, next time I see her, I am going to be jacked. and so I started.
And look at you now.
I started going to the gym the next day.
Oh, man.
Still never seen the girl, but met my lovely wife. Couldn't be happier. But I needed it to happen. It was one of the best things that happened to me. I learned the gym, and I'm able to translate that and teach people every day now.
So what else would you like to do in terms of, other than reaching out and speaking to people? And if this could reach any local school administrators or law enforcement or anybody that would be in a position to have Shawn maybe come to your school or your group or whatever that military organizations, whatever that is, I know you would like to do those kinds of things. But what else would you like to do?
Real quick, just to touch on that.
Yeah.
It's becoming a deep passion for mine to get into the schools and work with kids. It's been difficult for me to do for whatever reason. I've hit a lot of yellow tape. I talk to a lot of parents. Parents love the idea, but I'm tired of turning on the news and seeing these kids dead from fentanyl. I believe schools are trying to do what they can, but I'm willing to bet someone like myself can come in and grab the kids' attention in a little bit different manner, especially speaking from lived experience. So that's my main goal. That's what I want to do. Aside from that, I just want to continue. I'm blessed to do the podcast. I absolutely love it. I get to talk to cool people every time we do it. And as the guests that come on continue to get bigger, it's able to shine light on some of the other guests that I have on that might not have a nationwide name, but have just as incredible of a story. Yeah.
Well, listen, I've always said everybody's got a story. Some go through a little trials and tribulations to get there, but I just think it's so important to share these stories, these experiences, and you just never know. And if it impacts one person out there, then we've done our job, right?
Hands down.
So listen, I am thrilled for you that especially during the holiday season, that your family is good to go, and that things are kind of in a uphill and in a positive trajectory for you. So again, hopefully, and I'm gonna help you try to get out in front of those schools and whatever you can do here in our community. But so great to visit with you, Shawn. Thank you for sharing your story. Shawn Livingston, again, on Instagram, is I am Shawn Livingston, and it's Shawn, SHAWN, Shawn Livingston. If you'd like to talk to him on a one-on-one basis or just find out more about what he's been through, it's just an amazing story. So great to see you, sir. Thank you so much. Go ahead. No.
I was just going to say, if anybody wants to check out the podcast, it's on Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, iHeart, basically every major platform. 100 Miles to Redemption, the documentary, is on Amazon. It's on a lot of other streaming platforms, but just give it a Google. A
lot of people might want to take up running in the new year or exercise and stuff.
There we go.
So now you can see the powerful effect it can have.
New year, new you. Let's go.
Amen to that. Shawn, thanks again, brother. Good to see you. All right, this is another episode of Pickup Lines presented by Gamez Law Firm. The last one before Christmas, so Merry Christmas to you and your families out there, and hopefully we'll see you one more time before 2024. So until then, I'm Rudy. We'll see you soon.
Merry Christmas. For now.